Good evening, everybody, and welcome, warm welcome to All Saints North Worcester Life Group for the occasion of an evening with. And tonight we have the great distinction and honour of welcoming Nancy Goudie, who's a great friend of Liz and I for many, many years. Nancy, it's fantastic that you've come to speak to us. You're a total inspiration to us and have been for years and years. I did a bit of mathematics. I think it may well be 42 years ago we first met in 1979. And it just feels like it. 1979, and you and Ray played drums, your husband, and we went, as you know, to Canada and with the Dave Pope Band and had a wonderful tour. Came back to the first spring harvest that ever was.
Yeah.
Pressed that in and laughed an incredible amount. And just to mention that you came to stay with us actually when we first lived in Wolverhampton on your Heartbeat tours occasionally, and your car was snowed in, so you just came. And I always remember you saying, "Oh, Raymond, make me some tea and toast."
That's a bad accent.
Which I'm sure you still do, and I've taken it on actually. It's nothing like tea and toast. Just a quick word about Ray, and then I'm handing over to Liz. He was the most extraordinary man for everybody, just incredible, the most wise and an exceptional visionary for young people and youth ministry. Absolutely incredible. The two of you together changed so many lives. We're going to hear about that, I'm sure. And I went to him just on a personal level. He was the most wise person I knew. And I drove all the way to see him one day for a problem I had. And he just gave me something fantastic to hang on to, which I still do to this very day. So we miss him. So we're looking forward to hearing all your stories, and they'll be vibrant and they'll be wonderful. So at this point, I'd love to hand over to my lovely wife, Pippa.
I know. Well, yes, I'm not calling you Nikki. So
Okay.
There we go. Oh dear. Nancy, really, we just would love you to tell us a bit of your story. Now, I say a little bit of your story because there's just so much to say, isn't there, really, and to hear about. And we'll hear perhaps in a bit more detail about one or two things later. But maybe you could give us a brief outline of how you've come to be south of the border and what you actually do. Exactly.
Okay. Well, I think we were pointed it out earlier as people were coming on that I am Scottish. And I left Scotland with my husband in 1980. And we came to England really on a call of God to start a band called Heartbeat. Anyone remember Heartbeat apart from Rob and Liz, obviously. But we travelled all over the country, and we just really believed for God to do miracles through what we were doing. And boy, did we see the miraculous happen really everywhere we went. It was quite incredible. As Rob has said, I was married for 43 years before my husband died in 2016. That is a story in itself, to be honest. But if you do want to read the story of what happened with that, then I've written a book called Our Greatest Adventure, and it certainly was an amazing adventure with miracles and faith-building stuff happening all the time. But yet, at the end of the day, we didn't receive the miracle that we wanted, which was Ray being completely and utterly healed. But I have two incredible sons and two amazing daughter-in-laws. I'm a very blessed woman, I have to tell you. One of my sons lives in America with his wife, and my other son and his wife are very, very close to me, very near where I am. So we have a little bubble in this lockdown time, which is great. So I get to see them quite a bit. But as I said, we came south in 1980, set up a ministry called Heartbeat. We then changed the name in late 80s to NGM, which is the ministry that I'm still leading now to today. And as I say, have seen incredible things happen. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, teacher, I go to churches, events, conferences. I run my own conference called Nancy Goudie Spiritual Health Weekends, which Liz has been to one of them, which is lovely. So yeah, that tells you a little bit. I've been doing these spiritual health weekends for women for, well, this will be my 25th year celebration coming up in 2022. We were supposed to do it in 2021, but of course everything with COVID happened, and so we delayed it until 2022. Been in ministry for 40 years. Yeah, I'm getting old, I'm afraid, but still loving Jesus, passionate about seeing lives transformed and just following him wherever he leads me to go.
I know we've mentioned, Rob did, and you've mentioned the band Heartbeat. And I just wondered, could you tell us some of those amazing things that happened during the 80s? Give us a little taste of your adventures there.
Yeah, well, what we used to do was to go into schools, colleges, universities, and prisons sometimes as well. And really, we just invited the school kids and the people that went to colleges and universities to come along to an event on the Friday night. So we would go in the whole week into schools, do the assemblies, do lunchtime concerts, do lessons, and then invite them to come along. And it was basically, they didn't pay to get in, it was free. So we didn't know who was coming. So every portion of the day, like every third of the day, we would spend time in prayer, asking God to bring people, first of all, and then for God to move in incredible ways. And boy, did he move in incredible ways. So let me tell you a few things that happened. One was, I remember going to Preston. No, let me tell you Birmingham, first of all. Let me tell you about Birmingham. I'll tell you about Preston in a minute. But we went to Birmingham and we were invited in by the local churches there, and they got a hold of this town hall that we were going to hold the Friday night meeting in. And we prayed that God would bring an audience. Well, the place was packed, 600 people. The Christians were asked to leave because there just was no room. People were crammed in this building. And there actually is a video of this, which is just incredible, where, you know, my husband gets up at the end of the concert and just gives a 10-minute kind of preach about Jesus on the cross, asking people to respond if they wanted to give their lives to Christ. And at the end of that appeal, everyone stood. So you can see me in the video going up to Ray saying, and then Ray, they haven't understood you. You'll need to get them to sit down again and do it all over again. And so he did. He told them, right, sit down. And then he did the whole appeal. And he said, let me tell you what a Christian means. It means that you turn your back on the things that you've done wrong and you follow Jesus. And he outlined exactly what a Christian is. It's putting God as boss of your life, is how we used to put it. And he said, now only those who really do want to give their life to Christ, I want you to stand. Everyone else, you sit where you are. They all stood again. And I'm like, they definitely haven't understood him, because you see, in the balcony, I saw this older couple. They must have been in their 70s. And I thought, they must be Christians. And yet they're standing. So I thought that he's definitely not understanding him. So I said, I sidled up to Ray again and said, you'll need to do it again, Ray. They're definitely not understanding you. So he got a bit angry at this point. He said, right, everybody, sit down. Now listen to me. He said, God is not mocked. He said, only those who really want to give their lives to Jesus, you stand. And they all stood again. 600 people, including that couple in the balcony who had only heard the music and decided to come in, weren't Christians, gave their life to Jesus. The pastor was dying, because he was like, how many journeys into life have you got? To his organizer. And his organizer said, I brought 100. 100? That's not good enough. You should have brought a lot more. So it was a good problem to have. But that was in Birmingham. And that was kind of the picture of what happened at various places. As I said, we went to Preston, and We held it in I think it was an 800-seater hall, but instead of taking it for one night, we took it for 5. That's the first and last time we'd ever done that kind of scale of thing. We went into Preston for 3 weeks and invited people to come to the 5 nights. And I remember, I mean, again, we just didn't know who would come, who would turn up, because it wasn't like a ticketed event. You had to have a leaflet to get in, but that was all. And anyway, I decided that I would go out to the shops 2 hours before the doors were about to open. And because the theatre that we had it in, it's called the Charter Theatre, is in the middle of a shopping mall. And so I thought, I'll just nip down and get something, back up again. Went out to the door of the theatre and honestly almost died. We had just finished a prayer meeting saying, God, bring people along. What I saw blew my mind, because there they were 2 hours before the event was due to start, queuing, and the queue went all the way down into the shops. I ran back, I forgot the shops, I didn't even go. I ran back to tell everyone, come and see this. You have no idea what God's doing. Just incredible. And then we got the people all into the building. We had to ask the Christians to leave. So what we did was we went to another part of the theatre, and in that hall we held a prayer meeting. Do you know, people were saved in the prayer meeting as well as saved in the main auditorium. It was just incredible. I think there was over 500 people saved through those 4 nights were evangelistic and 1 was a praise evening. Just incredible stories of lives being transformed. Do you know, I thought about something today as I was preparing for tonight. I thought, we came to Worcester. Does anyone remember Heartbeat coming to me? Oh, somebody does. Paul, is that you? Somebody does. Yeah, we came to Worcester, which was incredible. I think the guy's name, the organiser's name, was Richard Wood. I don't know if any of you remember that. Yeah, you remember that? I mean, I haven't heard from him for years. I think he popped up somewhere to say, oh, do you remember the mission, Nancy, in Worcester? It was incredible what God did. We held it in one of the main halls somewhere. Don't know what it was called. You probably will remember, but I don't know what it was called. But we asked for a 2-hour prayer meeting beforehand with the churches, and very few people turned up to the first prayer meeting. That night we had the hall, and it was really well filled. I can't remember if it was packed or not, but it was definitely well filled. But we didn't get to have a concert at all because the sound, we couldn't get the electricity on in the building. For some reason, even the generator that we brought in would not work. And we thought, oh my goodness, this is terrible. So what we did was we said to the people who were there, you know, from schools, etc., here's a ticket, come back tomorrow night, we will let you in for free. So come in. And they all left and went home. But the Christians who were in the building, we asked them to stay. And we led a prayer meeting and a praise meeting. And it was just a wonderful. The next day after we'd had that prayer meeting and prayed and praised God, and it was an amazing time. And after that, we came into the building, and the technician said, we haven't done anything, but the whole system has just righted itself somehow. It just felt like God wanted to get a hold of the situation and say, hey, it's important to pray. And you know, the prayer meetings were amazing after that. I remember one lady came to the prayer meeting in a wheelchair and got up and walked out of it. It was incredible what happened at some of those prayer meetings. And I remember one of the main things I can remember is when Ray preached, and before he had kind of given the appeal, or just as he was giving the appeal, this girl got out of her seat and ran to the front and got down on her knees, and tears, you know, were coming down her face. So I went down off the platform, and I get down beside her, and I said to her, you know, why did you run so quickly to the front? She said, I couldn't wait to give my life to Jesus. And that just kind of sums up the 80s. It was great. We saw so many things happen everywhere we went. And, you know, not only that, but actually we saw people being healed as well. Just miraculous healings where God would just do stuff. It wasn't as if we, to begin with anyway, it wasn't as if we were expecting it. It just happened. This little lad, Ray asked people to stand if they wanted to give their lives to Jesus. And this little lad stood up to give his life to Jesus. And at that moment, he had his arm in a sling because his wrist was broken or had been broken. And then it would be put in plaster. And then just that day, the plaster was taken off. But it was obvious that it had been set incorrectly. So he was told he had to go back to the hospital to get it, you know, broken again, I guess. I don't know what they do, and set correctly. And in the middle of the meeting, while he stood to give his life to Jesus, he got a heat through his arm and he was completely healed. No one prayed for him. It just happened, you know, and it was as a surprise to us as it was to everyone there. But we were like, this is amazing. And all these mates are going, it's true, you know, this is what happened. And they all became Christians too because of that testimony. So yeah, we saw quite a number of miraculous things. Like I remember, I didn't know this at the time, but afterwards we got told by the pastor in Sheffield, who told us that a man brought his son who was blind to the concert and put him at the back of the hall and said, you know, you can listen to Heartbeat and I'll come in and just stay where you are and I'll come in and I'll pick you up afterwards. But after the concert was over, the father came back and the boy was busy looking at the shop that we had, completely and utterly healed, completely set free, blind eyes open. Just, you know, God is amazing, totally. So yeah, gives you a little brief outline of what happened in the 80s.
Those are amazing stories. But do you think that was just for a season, just for Heartbeat Days, or has it continued?
No, I don't think it's for Heartbeat Days. I think it's for anyone who believes God and can trust God to see things like that happen. When I told you I started my spiritual health weekends, and one of my prayers was, and still is, God, what you did in the 80s, come now and do here at the spiritual health weekends. And some of the things we saw in the 80s, and more actually, we're seeing now at the spiritual health weekends. We're seeing people saved. We're seeing people set free. We're seeing people healed. I mean, miraculous healings, miraculous salvations. A lady who was into witchcraft, and she came along to the I think it was not 2020, so it'd be 2019, came to that weekend, and miraculously gave her life to the Lord Jesus at the last minute, just before we were due to pack down. She came forward and said she wanted to give her life to God. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, Nancy, I was involved in witchcraft, and I want to tell you, I have never experienced anything like this before in my life. She came the next year, back to next year, and her face was completely glowing. And she had, you know, gone on with Jesus over that last year. This year, when I say this year, I mean 2020, before the lockdown started, we held two events, one in Preston and one in Windsor. And we work with partners now who bring people who can't afford to come to the weekends. And what we do is we raise money to be able to allow them to come on a bursary place, just really through the generosity of people who hear about it and want to give to it. And so they are partners, you know, we work with like CAP, Christians Against Poverty, but also people who work with prostitutes and helping people come out of prostitution and all this kind of stuff. So two of our partners brought people to the 2020 who were prostitutes, and 8 of them gave their life to Jesus. The people who brought them were just absolutely rejoicing, you know. So we've seen that, and we've seen, you know, life's just transformed by the power of God, like emotionally transformed as well as spiritually transformed. One lady who became a Christian at my weekend, she came and she didn't know Jesus, and I didn't know her story until afterwards. But she basically told me that her partner that she was living with was very violent, and she was really scared of him. And one day he pulled out a gun and held it to her head, and she thought, my life's over, he's going to kill me. And at the last minute, he turned the gun and he shot his own brains out. And she saw it, of course, it happened right in front of her. So you can imagine how traumatized that woman was. And she came to she couldn't sleep. I mean, she was just completely a mess. And she came to my weekend. She gave her life to Jesus and slept 8 hours solidly, as God had completely, you know, emotionally and mentally healed her, as well as spiritually, obviously, as well. Mm. So yeah, we've seen that, and we've seen people walk out of wheelchairs. One lady in Preston, after being prayed for, she got out of her wheelchair and she went up and down the aisle dancing and shouting, and reminded me of that, you know, the story in the Bible where the man outside the temple, you know, received his healing and he was leaping and jumping for joy. She was exactly the same. It was wonderful. So yeah, so we have seen that. But also, I tell you what else we've seen is we have seen in Heartbeat Days, it wasn't just the people who got saved on the night that became Christians, because those young people went home and they told their parents and told their aunties and uncles and, you know, cousins and all that kind of stuff. And what happened was whole families would come to know the Lord Jesus. And that's what's happening in the spiritual health weekends too, that one person comes and they become a Christian. This one lady became a Christian in 2018. Next year she came back and she brought her sister and her cousin, I think it was, and both of them became Christians. And now in the next one, she's bringing her mum and she's bringing her 2 daughters, and she is fully expecting them to give their lives to Jesus. It's just wonderful. I love it.
Oh, yes, you mentioned next year. So how can people come along? I mean, Sammy, that we all know, and I have been to the your spiritual weekends, and I mean, it's just such a marvelous, almost restorative time for people that go along as sort of long-held Christians, as it were.
Yeah.
I just wondered actually what gave you the idea right at the start, and then perhaps tell us about next year and what we can do.
Sure. Well, it was way back in 1996. I was in America speaking. Ray was with me. And in my own time with God, God spoke to me and said, when you go back to England, I want you to start a weekend for women. And I was like, Lord, you have the wrong woman. I don't even like women's events. That was how I felt about them in those days. They're a lot different today as to what they were then. And I was like, oh, I don't really want to do this, Lord. You know, I think you've got the wrong person here. And God said, no, Nancy, listen, if you had a piece of paper and you could write anything on this piece of paper, what would you write? And so I began to think, well, what would I write? So I began to write down, well, I would hold it in a 4-star luxury hotel. I would make sure there was a swimming pool and jacuzzis and steam rooms. And I would make sure that there was things that could pamper people physically, but also at the same time go deep spiritually. And, you know, I began to outline a whole load of stuff that I thought women would really love. You know, like we have a banquet meal on a Saturday night, and afterwards we have entertainment from NGM, worthy of the West End, to be honest. It's like, you know, musical theatre. And we have like optional sessions that people can be part of if they want to be part of, like, aerobics or aqua aerobics or Pilates or whatever it happens to be. And then we have things like a gospel workshop, like choir workshop, that type of thing, and all sorts of things, maybe learning to dance with one of our dancers, or, whatever it happens to be, on an optional basis. And then on the main sessions to have teaching that is relevant for everyone today, and also worship that just takes you into the heavens, so and opportunities for people to respond if they wish to do that. We've got amazing creative prayer room, and also something I do is that every year when people book in, I put their names on a list of paper, and I take the person's name before God and say, God, what do you want to say to this person? Now, you have to know, I don't really know. I mean, I would know a number of people that come to the weekend, but there was a whole vast majority of them that I wouldn't know. I mean, there's hundreds that come. So I'm like, just taking their names before God and saying, God, what do you want to say to them? And then at the appropriate time, that word is put onto a card and in an envelope, and then it's given to the person or read over the person at the weekend. And that is a very special time. Things that I wouldn't have known about people, and God has just spoken right into their lives. Like, for instance, I'll never forget this one, where God said to me that this woman, I want you to tell her that she is not small, but instead she is 10 feet tall in my eyes. And the word, I mean, there was a whole load of stuff in the word, but it was basically repeating quite a number of times. God says you're not small. He sees you as 10 feet tall. And the lady, one of my team who was praying over the lady and repeating it to the, like reading it to the lady, couldn't believe her eyes, because this lady was under 5 foot. She was 4 foot something. And she, I mean, the girl reading the card was like, I can't believe this. Nancy would never have known that this lady was so small. And it really deeply affected her. I remember another one this year. In the word, I mean, again, there's a whole paragraph or whatever, but part of the word was, God says to you, he has prepared a banquet for you. So don't settle for toast anymore when God's prepared you a banquet. And when that was read over the woman said, she said, do you know something? I don't like banquets. She said, and I've always said to people, oh, just give me a piece of toast. Well, I didn't know that. I had no idea that that's what she said, and here's God saying, don't settle for toast any longer when I have prepared you a banquet for you to eat. He wasn't talking about physical food, he's talking about spiritual food for this particular lady. But yeah.
So incredible.
Oh yeah, and how to get there. Let me tell you, I forgot about that one. Yeah, it's going to be held in Birmingham, so not too far away from you, where you guys are. It's going to be held at the Hilton Metropole Hotel, which is an amazing hotel. And it's going to be on the 11th to the 13th of February. In case you're worried about COVID and all that kind of stuff, the hotel have been absolutely amazing. They are, taking every precaution they can. But also, as well as that, they have said that if lockdown does come back at that time, because I mean, obviously the government have said from June, all big events can open up again. So that's another 7 months or 8 months on to February. But even if we do go back into lockdown, the hotel have said that they will refund everybody, apart from maybe a very small £10 admin charge, but apart from that, everything else will be refunded. So people can book knowing that their money is safe. In fact, we have we've got almost 170 booked in already, which is incredible. Yeah. But we can take somewhere between 450 and 600. So yeah, plenty of room.
That's going to be some organisation, isn't it? But brilliant.
Can I come along?
Yeah. Oh, to come along? No. Well, actually, to be honest, Rob, some men do come. Some husbands come and stay in the hotel. Obviously, don't come into the conference, but they have a kind of like weekend away while their wives are at the conference. They come along so that they can still see their wives, but they're entertaining themselves during the day. And then others come and are part of the team.
Yeah, of course.
Oh.
Of course.
Yeah.
God, sorry, my phone's on.
I think we haven't got a huge amount of time left.
Yeah.
We could really be here for hours, I think. But just very, very briefly, for those of us who are mostly used to a bit of a PAYE type of life, you live by faith, and I just wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about that before we just finish with perhaps how you see the future.
Yeah, sure. Well, since 1980, we have individually and corporately lived by faith and depended on God for our finances. Something that I would never have thought was possible, to be honest, when we lived in Scotland. But I remember the very first time God ever provided for us was when my husband was was with Rob and Liz over in America or Canada, I think it was at the time. And he was away with Dave Pope's band, and he called me one night to tell me what God had done in his life. And it was just amazing to hear what God had done. I remember it distinctly because he phoned at 11 o'clock that night. But of course, to me, it was something like 4 a.m, something like that. So I was woken up out of my sleep, but I was thrilled because God was just doing amazing things in his heart and life. And while he was on the phone, he said to me, Nancy, could you bring £50 across with you? Because money is really tough. And of course, in the excitement of everything God was doing, I said, oh yeah, that's fine. Came off the phone and thought, where am I going to get £50 from? Because unknown to Ray, money was really tight with me. And this is before we came into full-time work. So it was like I was still in a job, etc. And I just sort of prayed and said, please God, let me have the money. And then suddenly I remembered that an old minister had given me £10 to take to Ray while he was in Canada. So I thought, well, that's £10, God. I need 40. And the next morning I got up and the post came. And in the post was this letter with 4 £10 postal orders in it, no letter, came from London. We knew no one in London, no idea to this day where it came from. But God had answered my prayer. And I remember going down on my knees saying to God, God, I'll never, ever doubt you again. I have to tell you, I have. But as I've grown in believing God for finance and believing God, to save people, heal people, set people free, it's a journey. It really is a journey. And I could keep you here all night giving you stories of how God has provided for us through the years. But he's, sometimes goes past your deadlines. And that's when it's really, really scary. But God has never let us down. Never let us down. In fact, I'd say we're in a better position nowadays than we have been had we stayed at home and been in air. And God is the most generous employer I have ever been with, but also he takes you to the limit. Do you know what I mean? When you've got nothing, and you don't know where your next penny's coming from. And you've just got to trust him through that somehow or other he will do it, and he does. Quite incredible.
Yeah. I know we've had a funny year, a very strange year. You have been incredibly busy, I know, because of spiritual exercises and online webinars full of encouragement for people, and it's been marvellous. And mostly marvellous is the weekly National Day of Prayer that you've really encouraged people and really guided us as to what to pray about, which I know has been so much hard work, but it's been brilliant. But what do you think God's saying to us now at this time? Just to finish off with.
Sure.
A big question, but
yeah, well, first of all, just to say it's an absolute privilege to do the National Day of Prayer. It's been incredible. It's something that I never thought would be. I mean, here I am almost a year later, still doing it every week, every Friday. Anyone who wants to join us, by the way, I'm sure Liz will be able to tell you how to do that. Just send me either your email address or just get on Facebook and find Nancy Goudie and you'll see that the prayer points are posted there every week. But what do I believe God's saying? I believe God's saying there's fresh new things ahead for a start. And I believe that God wants to move in a deep and a wonderful way. Way back in Heartbeat days, God promised us, he gave us a song and he gave us a prophetic word that said, I am coming with a new move of my spirit to this land. Gave us a picture of a huge tidal wave coming towards the shores of Britain. We wrote the song called Heal Our Nation, if any of you know that particular song. And people have been saying nowadays, my goodness, that song was appropriate then when it was written in 1985, but it's still as appropriate today. And we so need God to come and move in our land and move in our world. And I would echo that and say yes. But it starts with individuals. It starts with people. And let me finish a story and then apply it to what I feel God's saying, particularly to you guys tonight. But back in Heartbeat days, we went to Northampton. And again, it was an amazing time where we saw incredible, load of people become Christians at this particular concert. But I want to tell you about 10 of them who all came from the one school. They went back into their school on the Monday and they asked the only Christian teacher if she would help them start a Christian union, because what they wanted to do was to tell their mates how to come to know Jesus, because they just got so excited and so fired up. They wanted to tell everybody, but didn't quite know how to do that. So they thought, let's have a Christian union and see if we could invite people to come. So that's what they did. They started a Christian union with just the 10 of them. And then they prayed. They prayed every morning before school started. And then they thought that's not long enough. So then they started to pray at lunchtime. And then they discovered that's not long enough. So they prayed after school as well. So 3 times a day, they were praying for their mates to come to know Jesus. Do you know what happened? A year later, 200 people were in the Christian union. And people had been saved and healed and set free because of these 10 hungry people. And I just wanted to challenge you tonight to say, how hungry are you? How hungry are you for God to move in this nation and in this land? Because God wants to move, but he's looking for people who are hungry. He's looking for people who will go further than you've ever gone before. He's looking for people who will get a hold of, the word of God. Here's my Bible here, and get a hold of the word of God and say, I'm going to read this, I'm going to pray this, I'm going to believe this, and I'm going to keep on going and see God do something amazing through our own local place. I just think what could happen in your locality if we all got fired up for God, if we all just said, God, I want you to come and do something in me and change me so much that other people see, that something has happened in your heart and life. Jesus said we do not put our light under a bushel. We don't hide it. We display it. And when you have really touched the Lord and known his presence in a deep way, you can't help but show it. You really can't. I remember my husband, numbers of times when God touched him, even to have a normal business meeting, he would sit there and he would talk about Jesus, and tears would pour down his face because he just loved the Lord so much. And, you know, people would like think there was something wrong, but all it was he loved Jesus so much. And, you know, if you love him, you can't help but show it. I mean, I have been alone in the sense that I'm not married to anyone else. I've been on my own for the last 4.5 years, but you know, I'm never alone, never. Because I know we all say that God never leaves you or never forsakes you, but it's, you know, it's so true that I don't have a husband, and he is my husband. He is my friend. He is my God. He is my Lord. He is my Savior. He's my constant companion. He's just, wow, I could go on telling you a little bit that for a long time, because it's just, I live in a house that has the presence of God in it. I live for him, and he's just amazing. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's just brilliant. And you've given us a delicious taster, really, of everything. And I know that a lot of your life was summed up. You've just written a book. Who would ever have thought, isn't it? And when we do the questions, when we finish the recording, if I can be grown up enough, I shall put your details in the chat. But people can email you if they want the book, and I can certainly pass details on. I mean, that's just one of many inspirational books, but people might want to read that definitely, because it puts that bit of your story in the whole, doesn't it?
Yeah,
right from when you were a little girl. So
yeah, it starts when, you know, right way back for Ray and I, and then tells the story of the 40 years of ministry. So it was an exciting story to write. I loved it. Loved recalling all these things.
Exciting story to read. I think Brian and Judith still have my copy, but anyway.
Right.
So thank you so much, because I know you've been busy this week actually, but to give up your evening, and you just have that excitement. It makes me excited to think of all the future things that are going to happen, and it's just lovely to hear you. So thanks very much from us all.
Thank you.
Thank you.